Mhm.
Hi, my name is Lisa Grubbs, and I'm founder and president of NICU Helping Hands here in Fort Worth, Texas. And we are so glad to have you join us this afternoon for our very first virtual webinar. We are calling our series Point of Views. And so we are just thrilled to have you here with us. I'm going to tell you a little bit about.
Stop recording. I just got a text. Somebody's trying to get in, can't get in.
Well, as you introduce me, I'll go do the tech side of things.
You may need to edit this.
Wait, what should I do?
You're fine. Oh, I mean, we have quite a few people in the room, so.
Okay.
Should I start over?
No.
Yes. No? Okay. Sorry. Hi, we're trying to get somebody in the room. Oh, she's in. Okay.
Okay, great.
We're all getting used to the technology, everybody.
Yes, we're technology. So anyway, what I was saying was my name is Lisa, and I'm president and founder of NICU Helping Hands, and we are thrilled to have you join us this afternoon for our very first virtual webinar, and thank you for your patience as we practice a little bit with this new technology, but welcome to Point of Views. Joining me this afternoon is Crystal Grogan, our digital marketing manager for NICU Helping Hands, and Crystal and I are both thrilled to welcome Dr. Mara Stein. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Mara, Dr. Stein. She's a friend too, so that's a little bit
Mara,
difficult.
please.
Mara is a clinical psychologist in private practice, specializing in perinatal and maternal infant mental health. She is the co-author of Parenting Your Premature Baby and Child, The Emotional Journey, and Intensive Parenting, Surviving the Journey Through the NICU. Dr. Stein is a staunch advocate for trauma-focused care and is trained and certified in a range of integrative trauma therapies, a certified EMDR therapist, and an EMDRIA approved consultant and trainer for the Institute of Creative Mindfulness. She offers both EMDR foundational trainings for perinatal specialists and advanced workshops which take a deeper dive into the intersections and applications of EMDR and perinatal mental health. Her trauma work is grounded in her personal perinatal journey, which began 25 years ago, taking her through infertility, twin pregnancy, prolonged hospital bed rest, the NICU, and years of raising NICU graduates. We are so thrilled to have you with us, Mara. I had just the distinct pleasure of meeting her this last fall at the NICU Parent Network Summit, and got to know her a little bit there, and just recently enjoyed sitting in on a webinar that she was speaking at, and was so incredibly moved and touched by the story that she was telling that we decided to start our virtual webinar. And so we're thrilled to have you here with us.
Thrilled to be
invited. With
invited.
that, I'm going to turn it over to you because I want to make sure that we get to hear your story and the things that you're going to share with us today.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Crystal. I can't tell you what a pleasure it is to be invited. You know, you guys are my people. And I include everybody who's listening in and watching. My journey, I was thinking about this morning, that I'm right in the middle of anniversary time for me. 24 years ago now, I was in the middle of 6 weeks of hospital bed rest, on and off magnesium, back and forth between the antepartum unit and the little tiny room across from the nurse's station on the L&D floor. Because I'd gone into preterm labor with my twins at 24 weeks, and went from I'm coming in for an ultrasound to check growth, and a quick checkup, to the doctor looking at me with the kind of look you just really don't want to see from your OB when you're 24 weeks pregnant with twins. Saying, how much are you working now? And, you know, you're 50% effaced and centimeter dilated. And at that time, I really didn't understand the implications of that. In fact, they were sending me upstairs. The doctor's office was connected to the hospital. She said, I'm going to send you up to labor and delivery to put you on a monitor. Do you need to make any calls? And I said, oh, should I plan on being here all day? And she just looked at me like, uh-huh. And, you know, truly, I went in and it was cold here in Chicago. It was the middle of April, which is still cold. And I left and it was May 31st and it was hot. And that was really just the beginning, you know, just the trying to stay pregnant, trying to stave off disaster. And, you know, Lisa, we talked about this when we were first talking about doing this, about how much this quarantine has reminded me of bed rest.
Right.
And of what it feels like to be so scared and to feel, and in many ways be so helpless. And the only things that you can do are to stay distant, to keep some distance, in order to protect the people that you love. And it's such an internally contradictory kind of message, because we are almost always encouraged, get closer, go out, be with the people that you love, reach out, don't isolate. And so here now, you know, self-isolation is the thing. So it's so counterintuitive.
You know, when we were talking the other day, and when I actually listened to your other webinar, one of the things that struck me was that thread of what's happening now.
Yeah.
To those experiences of bed rest, of premature labor, of being in the NICU.
In the NICU,
and how hard it is, and how scary and isolating it is. And not just that, but also if you've had anything happen in your life, and most of us, at least at my age, most of us have had some trauma or have had just difficult things happen, whether that's a loss of a parent, a child, whether it's a cancer diagnosis in our family or for ourselves.
Right.
Whatever that may be, some of this isolation triggers some of those feelings that maybe we thought we had put on a shelf. And this is the analogy I use with my own, when my cancer journey was over, you know, I put all of the cards and the letters and all those things in a box, and I have it on the top shelf of my closet, kind of in the back where I don't even see it. And occasionally something happens and I'm like, oh, it's an anniversary or it's something like that. And I remember that box is up there. And so sometimes I'll look through it. It's not threatening.
Yeah.
But right now, some of this is threatening. And so I was really struck by the stories that you told, and how what we're going through now is reminiscent of maybe what we've been through before.
Yeah,
I think even, you know, I had my son overseas, and so I always thought it was, you know, the lack of communication. Again, when you're kind of thrown in the NICU, no one prepares you for that. And I think it's with what's going on right now, like no one even knows what questions to ask. I mean, the doctors and the scientists are trying to figure it out themselves. Like, you know, you kind of have those feelings of when you were in the NICU of, oh, well, every baby's different. And so you know, sometimes you're not getting just a direct answer. And I think that's what this reminds me of a lot of. It's like, you know, I don't even know what questions to ask. I've never been here before. A lot of those come up.
Yeah, very much so. The disorientation is really powerful, and the uncertainties are really frightening. You know, you go from a situation where you expect the newness. I mean, after all, bringing a new baby into a family is a developmental process, and it should be. And there's heightened vulnerability, there's heightened sensitivity on purpose. You know, I think we're built that way, we're wired that way, because after all, we're preparing internally and environmentally to bring this new person into our family. And so we need to be accessible, we need to be available to that. When something goes off track, though, you know, all of that is amplified and emphasized even more. And then when we're, you know, on top of that, when you've got this COVID situation, it's magnified even more. So you have an already appropriately, understandably, period of time where people are more sensitive. And then they keep getting hit. You know, we keep getting hit with stuff, and it's really difficult. There's a lot of stuff to weave together. And so this is where we think about, or I think about the metaphor. I've been using this metaphor since my twins were girls, identical twin girls. And very soon after they were born, within about 3 months or so after coming home from the NICU, so they were maybe 6 months old, I found an online support group, which was the only one of its kind at the time, the Preemie List. I don't know if any of you guys have ever heard of it, but it was, you know, the place to go if you were a parent of a preemie to get support. And as I met other parents, it was truly life-saving. I felt for the first time not crazy, or less crazy, and I certainly felt not alone. And what we were talking about was all these different pieces of trying to make sense of what was happening. And so this metaphor just sort of burst out of me, and I said, you know, it's like we're always weaving, right? Life is a process of weaving together all sorts of threads. We're born with some of them, we're given many of them, and as children, we come across many of them and pick them up as we move through life. And many times we are handed some that we are like, I don't want that. I didn't ask for that. What are you giving me that for? Like, that's burlap. I don't want burlap. I like silk. I like satin. I don't like that color. What are you giving? That's yucky. And I think it's normal to want to say, I'm not going to weave with that. I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to pretend that's not there. I'm going to avoid it. Or I'm going to just sort of wrap it up and move on. But the trouble is that I say the trouble, but it's really not, because it's the beauty of it. We are weavers. We are always weaving in one way or another. And so in some fashion, that thread is still going to be there. And our work is figuring out, what do I do with this thread? How do I make sense of this? And very often it doesn't make sense right away. It only makes sense as part of the larger tapestry that we're weaving until far later, when you take a step back and you look and you say, oh, that burlap thing in there, wow, look at what that does to the whole picture somehow. I couldn't see it at the time. I didn't have a choice. I had to work with it because it kept showing up. And at some point, one of two things is going to happen if these threads that you don't want keep showing up as they do. Either it's going to get part of a giant snarl in your fabric, in your tapestry that you're weaving, and that is trauma. These stuck, snarly places that you understand some of what's in there, but whoa, you'd be surprised what gets caught up in that snarl. And the other thing that can happen is you somehow figure out, you tentatively approach those threads that you don't like, and you begin to work with them, and maybe they don't get quite as snarled up, and you can weave them in. But they will continue to pop up because they are now part of your life tapestry. They're not going to just go away. And I think about your box in the closet, Lisa, and you know, I can remember laying in that hospital bed many nights, hoping to not be in the delivery room for 24 more hours or even 1 more hour, thinking, okay, I'm supposed to learn something from this, because I figured, I guess I could learn something from this. And I remember at the time thinking, I think I got it. I think we can calm down now, and can I just like go home and be normal? And looking back on it now, 24 years later, I have to laugh, because I didn't get anything. I didn't know. I mean, really what I got at that time is, you are in control of far less than you think you are. And at 28, which is what I was at the time, that was plenty. That was big. That was a lot right there. But wow, I thought, okay, I know I'm supposed to, intellectually, I know I'm supposed to get something out of this. I have to use this somehow. But you know, our desire to make it be like, okay, It's gone. I don't have to touch that anymore. I think also sets us up to feel like, whoa, what's wrong with me when it comes up again?
You know, and I think we've seen that. So we have program facilitators with NICU Helping Hands that are still in the hospital caring for our families at the bedside.
Amazing.
And even for them too, I think just that remembering the danger that they once felt and the fear that there is with COVID just strikes a chord, whether or not your child maybe had respiratory distress syndrome. And now suddenly they're at risk for this virus. And what happens if my grown child, my 13-year-old or my 14-year-old or my 7-year-old or my college student who was a preemie, what's their risk? How big is that impact going to be? And so I think that it conjures up these emotions and maybe that guilt that we felt when we couldn't solve it the first time, you know,
the helplessness and what do I do? And is this my fault? How do I protect them? What's my responsibility? I think that all comes back up. Yes.
And we're saddled looking at it again.
Yeah. It, you know, that intense, that sharp fear of this danger that is so destructive, and the awareness of our vulnerability is so heightened, and it's so familiar to those of us who have been in the NICU. And I know for myself, when this all really burst open, I was just thinking, you know, we parents of preemies know what does it mean to have somebody you desperately love struggle to breathe and to wish that you could breathe for them. How many of us could talk O2 levels and vent settings and DSATs and all the things? I was listening to a doctor a few weeks ago talking about how COVID lungs look like preemie lungs. And they want to put them on oscillators.
Right? That doesn't help.
Right. And I'm kind of going, and my whole body is vibrating, right, as I'm listening to this, because there's this familiarity, this awareness, I have had conversations about surfactant and vent settings and O2 levels. My kids came home on oxygen. And there's it's like those threads went boing right to the top. And so that knowing, so people, I think, say to themselves, oh no, what's wrong with me? I thought I worked through that stuff. I thought that was gone. And what I want you to know is, no, there's nothing wrong with you. This is what happens. What is resonant and familiar is going to reemerge. And there's another opportunity. It's an uncomfortable opportunity, but it is an opportunity to work at it again. And in those early days of quarantine, I thought, oh, I have time. I'm traveling right now for trainings. I think I'll blog. So I wanted to write a whole blog post about these similarities. And I did. And then there was another blog post kind of emerging, and it was refused to be a blog post. It decided it was a second person narrative. I mean, this is not a blog post, a second person. And I could not write anything else until I let this thing, this was the threads of my NICU experience with my kids and my ICU experience with my father, who died about 6 years ago, coming together and saying, hey, we're loose, we need to be woven here. And I ended up with a piece that I wrote, and then a piece of art based on photos from both of those times that I created. And it was layered, almost like a tapestry gets layered when you take more experience, more insight, more distance. You know, you go further out, and then you come in and you work it again, and you do something different now than you could have done, than I could have done 5, 6 years ago or 24 years ago. Things I couldn't have done then.
It's kind of that phrase of, if I knew now, if I knew
Yeah.
then what I know now, and it's getting that opportunity to take what has informed our life. I mean, those situations inform who we are.
They absolutely
shape
do.
and create us. And now you're at another stage in your life with a new perspective that's been gained over years and lots of different things.
Yes.
And now you do know. And sometimes I think that's helpful. And sometimes I think that makes it harder because you have more education, you have more experience.
You're not innocent anymore.
You're not innocent.
We're not innocent.
We're not naive anymore.
No.
So what do you say to families who are either in the NICU right now, because you know that situation has completely changed overnight. It's already hard, right? But maybe they can't go in the NICU together as a couple. Maybe it's the post NICU. They're freshly out. Maybe they've been out for a long, long time and really haven't thought about this in a long, long time. It's not that they ever forgot, but the years have distanced you so much from it, and other things have come up that you've gone through, and now suddenly you're back feeling that heavy, crushing pain in your chest where you can breathe. What do you say to parents other than, hey, you're not alone, because they're not
alone, and you're not crazy.
You're not crazy.
Not crazy.
This is normal. What do you say to them in terms of, what do I do with this now? I'm not crazy. I'm not alone. This is normal, but what do I do with this?
With the feelings.
With the feelings, and with just, again, that concept of, I thought I was okay not being able to control everything, but now suddenly I can't control anything. And it's this invisible, invisible, no face thing. Right.
Yeah. So there are a number of different pieces, I think, to what I might say to people, what I have said to people. The first thing I think that's really important is to remind people, all of us, that we feel as frightened and as overwhelmed as we do, because what we're worrying about is so important. Because the people that we're worrying about, the risks we're worrying about, matter more than anything in the world. And so it speaks to the attachment, it speaks to the relationships, it speaks to what's most central to all of us in our lives, that it matters. And so when you feel that fear, or when you feel that heightened awareness of, whoa, nobody knows. Oh, here, let's make a list of all the things nobody knows right now. And notice what you're worried about. First, pay attention to how many of those things, it's not going to be all of them, but they probably actually all do come back in some way or another to connection, to safety, to attachment, to love. You don't feel strongly about things when they're not important to you personally. So to take a moment and to look inside and ask, what am I most connected to about what I'm feeling right now? You know, so for some people, it may be like you were saying earlier, could my fragile child, who's not as fragile now as when in the NICU, but maybe my vulnerable child, because of their experience. Is my child more at risk than another child, for example? Well, this is the same worry, really, that we all had in the NICU, and why we scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed, right? This is why we understand hand washing. We get hand washing, right? Right? We get it. Like, that's how powerful that is. Maybe it's about separation. Maybe it's about the distance. You know, one thing that happened to me is that, you know, my kids are out of the house and they're overseas, and we were supposed to go see them. And then everything got canceled. And so they can't get here and we can't get there. And so here I am in this, in this same season, anniversary season, unable to reach my children directly. I can see them through a screen. I mean, it's sort of chillingly parallel, right? I can see them through glass, but I can't touch them. And in the NICU, you know, sometimes you need to back away. And so thinking about protectiveness, how we still love and protect and take care of the people that we're connected to, even from a distance. It doesn't mean we're less connected. And that the uncertainties are just plain hard. That is how it is. And it confronts all of us with what NICU parents, I think, have to face almost immediately, whether it's on bed rest or immediately upon admission. You know, I always thought it's just was so unfair that parents of preemies and NICU babies didn't get any time to adjust to really getting how helpless we are as parents. Fundamentally, when everybody else gets, like, you know, 20 years to figure it out, at least until their kids go off to college, let's say. Right? You know, you get a little more time. You get the illusion of control for a while. Yeah, we really never had that. We really didn't. So it's the world now is grappling with this thing that and I won't say we totally got it, because of course not, because we all as human beings need to feel to some degree that we have some control, because it's so overwhelming otherwise, to really hold that, to wrap your mind around that constantly. So I think it's a constant back and forth around recognizing, acknowledging, accepting as much as you can in the moment that which we cannot control. Because the truth is, that's true all the time. It's just that we can't really inhabit that all the time. Without taking in these experiences of, like, well, I'm in charge of this and I'm in control of that and I'm in control of that, because it does help us to stay grounded and oriented. And in fact, there are many things that we can influence and control within the uncertainties, within the loss of control that we're all inhabiting, both in terms of the current pandemic, and then of course in terms of NICU, post-NICU, you know, adjusting afterwards. There are that which we can control reasonably, we step forward and control. It's the acknowledgement and awareness and acceptance of that which we cannot reasonably control that is the struggle.
Yeah, you know, it's so interesting. We have a parent session, support session that we do with the parents, where it's called Being Part of Your Baby's NICU Care Team. Yeah. And it has a list of all these things that they rank of, what do you really want to do? You know, put them in order. What's important to you to be able to do in the NICU? And now we're going to encourage you to go to your NICU care team and say, can I do this? And that list is developed, intentionally developed, to where there's yeses that the staff can give the family, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And because there are things that the parents can control.
Yes.
Within the craziness of the NICU, our goal as a support organization is to help them see and find places to connect with the staff who are there to help them and to walk
Yes.
the journey with them, and to also remind them and point out and highlight the things that you can control, that are in your ability to do, so that the things that you can't aren't the overwhelming thing that we're all focused on. Most parents, I found, and at least in my own personal experience, want to help and want to support and be involved. And if they've got little pieces of that, even if it's little, it feels better. You're doing something.
It does. It does. And that's such a wonderful structure to put in place. You know, as I think about what you're saying, I would even expand the idea of what you can control to what you can influence. What you do that matters. Because we talk about control, but very often in these situations, we want to control stuff because what we want is access in a way that makes a difference. I want to be able to have an impact. I want my presence to matter. I want what I do to matter. I want to be able to help in this way or that way or another way. And so thinking about what you do that matters to you and to your partner and to the baby and to the bond between you is another way to think about how to make a difference, how to matter, how you're still present even if you're far away.
I'm writing this down, you know that. Because if I don't, I'll forget that. And I think that's, you know, I think I told Crystal this, or maybe, I don't know, maybe I told one of my kids this. It is an illusion that up until March, any of us were in control of anything.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's for somebody who's OCD and I'm slightly a control freak. I'm looking to see if Crystal's making a face or anything like that, but I'm slightly a control freak and OCD. And so I get this idea in my head that if I do this, I've got that under control. And if I do this, as long as I do these steps, everything's under control. And
I can keep everybody safe. It will be okay.
Yes.
Right? And think about your goal.
Yes, just everyday living, right? If I do this, if I don't speed, I'm safe. If I don't run the stop sign, I'm safe. If I don't drive off the 20-foot platform, I'm not, I'm safe. It really is an illusion, right? Because we think we're controlling all this stuff, and we don't take into account the strange things that just happen.
Right.
And so I love the fact that even for me, who is a control freak, if I change my, what's the word? Not perspective. I can't find the word, but if I change direction and I say, how do I control this? How can I manage the situation? And I change to how can I make a difference and impact? That's a completely different responsibility. That's a completely different burden, so to speak, than how can I change it, or how can I control it and manage it? Right. And how can I impact my family, my community? I'm doing something. Making a difference. And I love that idea of refocusing and maybe considering a different perspective to ease this process of fear.
Yes.
And I think, Lisa, a lot of fear on my part that I've felt during all of this kind of goes into play with the coulda, woulda, shouldas, and how they'll eat you alive. And, you look back at your NICU experience and you're like, well, I could have done this. Well, if I had only known, I would have done this. Oh, I should have done this. Now that you know better. And I have one friend that, taught me, when you made those decisions, you made them with the knowledge and the experience that you had at the time. You made the best decision that you could with the knowledge that you had at the time. And so I make myself, I stop a lot of the time now, and I'm just like, wait, why do I feel guilty? And I know this hypervigilance of like, am I going to miss something? Am I not asking the right question? Am I not doing something right? Am I going to make it worse? Am I going to, you know, am I putting him at risk, of, you know, of this virus? And a lot of it's, you're making, you know I can recognize that I'm being hypervigilant because of those coulda, woulda, shouldas. And it's like, no, you made all of the decisions you made with the knowledge you had. That's exactly what you're doing now.
That's right. That's right.
I think that has helped me kind of pivot at times when it's, you know, you get ramped up and you're like, wait, no, I am making the best decision with
Right.
all of the information that I'm getting right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that I think happens as parents, Crystal, is that especially moms, there is this myth that moms are omnipotent and omniscient. We should know everything. We should control everything. And so if there's something that's happened that's gone off track, the reflex is often, what did I miss? What should I have done? But the reality is that we're not magical. I mean, okay, fine, mothers are sort of magical, but we're not really magical.
Nose, Mara, come on. Don't say that.
We're not omniscient. How about that? We're not all controlling. We're not all powerful. But you know, that idea that it's, you know, cultural idea that, you know, I should have known. How did I not know that I was in preterm labor, for example? You know, how did I not know? I didn't know. Never been pregnant before. I didn't know what it felt like. And it didn't feel typical, in fact. But at the time, that like, oh no, what's wrong with me? Shouldn't I have known? I should have known. Then becomes this thought that snags on everything. So, you know, the analogy, the weaving analogy, is helpful here. You know, if you're given threads that smoothly weave together, they don't snag on anything. But what happens when somebody hands you barbed wire? Barbed wire snags on everything. So a thought like that, a belief, I should have known better. I should always know better. I should always know what to do. I should always be able to fill in the blank. That's going to snag on so many other threads. And at a training recently, I had the participants do a group weaving over the 3-day workshop. And I had all kinds of materials in there. And I have it here. And one of the things that I brought in was actually barbed wire as something to weave with. And it's interesting because, you know, you can barely see it anymore because there's so many layers. But when I pulled out the barbed wire and was just getting it ready and I was near other threads, literally it snagged on everything. Literally. So it snagged on this, it snagged on this, it snagged, and other things, other yarn that was around me. And I was standing there at a break time saying to people, this is a metaphor come to life. Literally the barbed wire snagged on everything. And that's what it feels like. Because you think, why am I remembering this other thing now? Why am I feeling so helpless in this other situation where it's not, like, that doesn't usually happen to me. But that the activation of those old stuff, the old feelings, comes because the barbed wire grabs it sometimes, because it is so uncomfortable and it's difficult to work with. You would never intentionally choose to work with that sort of material.
No, I want silk.
I do too. I like satin and silk and cotton, and
I don't want the
fake
silk either. I want the really expensive silk that is the finest that you can get.
Yeah, I agree. And chenille has some texture. It's soft. It's pretty. You know, we want the stuff that's soft and doesn't snag. We want the stuff that doesn't cut the skin and leave us bleeding. But in these situations, pregnancy complication, a preterm delivery, a complicated NICU stay, or any kind of NICU stay, let's just say that, we're going to have these experiences that we didn't even know existed. Like, I did not know that material even existed in life and that you were supposed to be able to weave with that. I do not know how to work with that. And of course you don't, because you never had to weave with it before. So you begin to approach it. You begin to look at it. You begin to examine it and see, how might I work with this? And it's going to change over time. It's supposed to change over time. And so then when we revisit some of this old stuff later, could be months later, could be years later, could be decades later. We're actually coming at it from a different vantage point. And so you haven't regressed. You're coming at those same themes, those same situations from a different place, a different vantage point, with knowledge and experience, with layers of your tapestry that you did not have the last time or the time before.
Do you think that, so we've been there, right? We've been there, we've done it, we've seen it. We've seen
Yes.
it before.
We've survived it. We've lived through it.
Yes, we've survived it. Do you think that sometimes, why do you think sometimes it's quicker and, I don't want to say easy, but a faster recall for some people to go, oh, I've seen that, I've done that, I know how to walk around that, I know how to handle that. Why do you think that sometimes there are people who really struggled the first viewing of that material, right?
Yeah, right.
That now their recall or their whatever that is, it makes it quicker to or easier to handle the material.
Yeah.
Versus when we see it again and it's almost like paralyzing and
yes,
so
that's exactly the word.
It's paralyzing. So I'll do the confession that I'm not a NICU mom, right? I think most people who know me know that. I've lost 2 children, but I'm not a NICU mom. But I remember when I had a cancer diagnosis about 10 years ago, and I was sitting in chemo, and there was a woman sitting across from me, and she was just lovely, and she was so encouraging. And as we talked during our chemo session, she said to me, it came out that this was her second bout with cancer. And I sat there in the first bout, right? And I thought, oh, no. How do you do that? Because there's a naivety, even though you're going through something the first time, there's some, you're naive about some things, right? But when you're a repeat offender, you know, and I've heard NICU moms call themselves that. I'm a repeat offender. I don't know if that's better or worse. And so I thought about that, the cancer thing too, you know, you don't know maybe the first time going through because you haven't experienced
all new.
Before. Why is it that sometimes we balance that better, or sometimes it's a repeat and we go, know that, and I know how to do that, and we'll keep going, versus I know that and I can't go near that. I can't, and we're paralyzed. Why does that happen?
That's a great question. So you remember how I said that sometimes when you come across or you're given something like barbed wire, threads that you really don't want to work with are very difficult to work with. You end up with a big snarl in the tapestry, a big snarl in the fabric, and that's trauma. So the answer to your question, I think, has a lot to do with how many and where those knots are in any person's individual tapestry. So some of us came into the NICU and had some snarls from earlier on that we managed to work around and that were okay enough, but that when we walked into the NICU, there were a few of those threads that went, this one is getting really, really activated and is you know, insisting on showing up as you're weaving now. Old stuff that isn't untangled yet. So you're pulling on that thread, and this old tangled piece up here is getting all shaken up, but it's all snarled up, so it's stuck. It's stuck, and it hasn't yet been untangled and rewoven. And that's what, there are lots of ways that people can get that stuff untangled, depending on the nature of it, depending on how tangled it is, depending on how many, finding peers, getting support, journaling, talking, writing, yoga, therapy, but therapies that go from the bottom up, that go from the inside out, that really acknowledge that I can think about that stuff all day long and the knot is still there. My thinking about that knot is only going to go so far to untangling certain kinds of knots. Some knots just need a little bit of help and they untangle really nicely. It's the nature of the knots. So when you see somebody who says, oh, I know what that is, what that suggests to me is that they've either, the materials that they were given, so to speak, in the first time around, they found a way to be able to utilize. Maybe they had prior experience. Maybe they'd done some earlier work around some of these same struggles, so that when confronted again, they didn't work so hard to avoid it. They could address it. And so it didn't get stuck and tangled and pull everything in creation in with it. And then sit there for 10 years until it got activated again. And so they're like, oh, that thread, I know how I need to work with you. I need to go get some gloves. Because otherwise, you know, everything gets gnarled and tangled. And so I know how to work with this thread, this collection of threads. I'm going to do these things, or I need to do it a little at a time, or here's how I prepare, or maybe I need some help. Maybe this is when you have two people weaving together. There's so many ways we can do that. And then when somebody is faced in the here and now with something that resonates with something old and says, oh, no, I can't. Or they get completely subsumed and overwhelmed. What's happening is very often getting pulled back into an old experience and re-experiencing something that actually has not actually been metabolized into memory. So let me go back to the weaving metaphor. If I have a knot in my fabric that has not been untangled and rewoven, all those threads that are in that knot could become part of my tapestry. But right now they're a knot on top of my tapestry. And I can get pulled and sort of sucked into that tangle and be in that re-experiencing mess, but it isn't going to make much sense. It's going to be overwhelming, and it's still a knot. When that knot is untangled and rewoven, it has become part of my tapestry. It has actually become memory. So when we experience trauma, and I will define trauma for you as a wound, as a disruption, a rupture. When there is trauma that has not been rewoven, that experience doesn't move into memory. It actually sits there waiting for a moment when we get too close, and then you fall in. You fall kind of back into the experience. And that's why it can feel so incredibly familiar, but in a way that freezes you. You can get into that autonomic fight, flight, freeze, or faint. You know, you can get just totally like limp and immobilized, collapsed. This is the nervous system screaming, danger, danger, danger. And it could be an indication, again, depending on what the current day trigger is, could be an indication of that old experience saying, oh, you wanna go ahead, you know, re-experience that? Here you go. And the nervous system just replays it and replays it and replays it, but it's like a program that has never been updated. It recurs and recurs and recurs. It's not adaptive. You can't take that experience and apply it yet. But all is not lost at all, because we actually have a number of ways. And by we, I mean the support community, the therapy community. We have some really amazing ways to help with the untangling so that doesn't happen anymore.
So Mara, I think we have a question from somebody. Crystal, I know, so I'm going to hog all the questions. So I'm glad that we have questions from somebody else.
I'm glad. I would love to hear questions and comments.
Yeah. Crystal, why don't you ask our guest question?
We have a question about, can you speak to the need or desire to temporarily use medication to cope during this difficult time?
Yes.
Says, I feel guilty for wanting to use it to cope only during this time. I feel the postpartum anger coming back and I want to be able to help myself, but also want to be aware of my feelings and be able to process them without intervention with meds.
Mm-hmm.
This is also hard and such a roller coaster.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, the roller coaster sometimes feels like you're not actually in the seat of the roller coaster, you're getting dragged behind the roller coaster. So I think that I'm going to give you another metaphor that I use quite a bit as well, and that I hope will help answer your question. I really think that anything that helps us with shock absorption is something that we should embrace. So if you're driving a car down the road of life and you're driving down a newly paved highway with clear skies and no traffic, and your car is, fueled up and all set, if you don't have a lot of shock absorption in your car or moderate shock absorbers, you don't really notice because the road is smooth. You don't have to dodge traffic. You're not making lots of turns. It's a nice straight road, like the road between Chicago and Denver, Chicago and Texas, right? Like all that flat land, right? You're going. It's smooth. It's okay. There's no blizzard. There's no rainstorm. There's no fog. It's all good. But you take that same car and you put it in the pothole-ridden streets of Chicago in the middle of winter, and you're going to notice that your shock absorbers are really struggling to keep your car from shaking. And it's also going to wreak havoc on your shock absorbers because it's pounding them. It's really pounding them. If you improve the shock absorbers in that car, you can drive and navigate better. You can anticipate those potholes. You can deal with the rainstorm or the blizzard because you're not worried about your car flipping over, because every time you hit a little bump, the whole car is shaking. So I view appropriately prescribed medication as shock absorbers in the car. And we are nowhere if not in the pothole-ridden streets of Chicago in a snowstorm right now. Okay, there is no shame, in my view, in saying, I need some heavy-duty shock absorbers right now. You still are driving. You are still navigating. You still need to get from point A to point B in that car. And we get no prizes for doing it without shock absorbers. You do not get a trophy at the end if you do it without shock absorbers. I appreciate wanting to still feel and process. But if you think about it, if you are concentrating on keeping your car from flipping over or falling apart because there's no shock absorbers every time you hit one of those potholes or a bump, you actually can't feel your feelings. Your feelings, let's say metaphorically, being all the stuff that's happening in your appreciation of the pretty snow or the other drivers or the place you're going, because you're trying to keep your car from falling apart. You're trying not to crash. You're not really feeling anything in terms of depth at that point because you can't. When we're in an alarm state, that's all we got. That's all you got. And that's intentional, really. We're wired that way, I think, for a good reason, because this is survival. And so we can do quite a bit to help buffer that sense of always being on that edge of, oh God, what's gonna happen? So that again, you have a little more breathing space, then you can feel your feelings. And so having the right partner to talk about the appropriate choices for medications and dosages and how to think about that actively, collaboratively, so that you get the shock absorption without it feeling like your whole body and emotional system has now had a shot of Novocaine. I mean, that's not the goal. That's not anybody's goal. It's not my goal when I make a referral for medication, and it's certainly not the psychiatrist's goal who I refer to. Nobody wants to numb everything, but making it possible to drive and experience, I think that makes sense. And if you're noticing that this is happening, good for you for noticing. That's tremendous. That's really tremendous. Give yourself a lot of credit for that, because it's really easy to get into that, you know, like, I'm just going to muscle through. I'm just going to do it. And we all know that there can be lots of ripple effects and repercussions to doing that. And really, when you do that, you actually are kind of giving yourself a shot of Novocaine, because you got to numb yourself to do that. So it ends up sort of the opposite of what often the conventional wisdom out in the world is. Like, oh no, you don't want that. You want to feel. Well, I want to feel, but I want to feel in such a way that I can actually work with those threads. Here, I'm mixing metaphors. So I can work with those threads instead of being like, no, every time I get near that, it gashes me and I'm bleeding and I have to deal with the bleeding.
That was a great question.
I hope that makes sense. Yeah, it's a really great
I love
question.
that analogy. It makes so much more sense than, you know, just the ups and downs, because it's a roller coaster, but that makes it, that makes a lot more sense to with the shock absorbers.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah, and I just hope it allows people to give us all permission to take on and take in and do whatever helps to have that shock absorption. That's a good thing. That's not. I hear all kinds of terms for things like therapy or medication. You know, people say things like it's a crutch, or you're dependent. And I have to tell you, I don't think that that's generally accurate. I really think that it's, again, a collaborative effort. It's like having the right equipment in your car. You still are living. You still need to do the things that you're doing. It's just that it allows you access to what's going on inside of you and to be able to engage what's going on outside of you. That's what we want.
Do we have any other questions, Crystal?
No, I don't see any more that have come in.
You know, Maura, knowing that we were going to be talking about this, I had been doing a little bit of reading, and I came across kind of for my end, wrapping today up, and of course I want everybody to have an opportunity to say whatever they'd like to. I love this, and I feel terrible because I printed it out and I didn't print who wrote it. So this is a quote from somebody, I just don't know who it is. And the writer was talking actually about a tapestry, and had referred Boom, who used this metaphor about tapestries as well. But I love this. No thread of experience, good or bad, is wasted. When it appears to be that way, we just have to remind ourselves that we are simply looking, and this person says, at the back side of the tapestry.
Yes.
And the one weaving it together knows precisely what's happening. And I love that, the idea that, I remember when I was growing up, my mother did a lot of cross stitching. And it would be so pretty on the top, you know, and what was presented sometimes was really pretty, always pretty. But when you looked at the back of it,
what did it take to get there?
It was a big hot mess, right? And so I love the idea that no experience is wasted. I think going into this, there can be this idea of, you know, I think for a while it was nice that the world stopped. Crystal and I talk about this all the time. I'd like to take a vacation, but when I come back, everything's such a mess because everybody else has continued to keep moving at a frenzy. And so everything kind of slowed down. We all liked that for just a hot second, and then that was over. We were ready to move on, but none of this is wasted.
No.
And so it's how we deal with those threads and how we untangle them. And I think that one of the things that I think so important as we kind of continue to move through this process is knowing that we're not alone. And I know that people say that a lot, oh, you're not alone. But truly, there are so many people and so many avenues to reach out for support. And so I want to encourage those who are listening today and who will watch this recording later to remember that there is somebody you can reach out to. While you may not know any of us personally, you can always reach out to us. You can ask a question, you can email, you can text us, and we're there. I mean, for NICU Helping Hands, you can email us at info@nicuhelpinghands.org. You can visit our website. We're always available. And if we don't have the answer, which we may not, which is okay, right? That we don't have the answer, but we will hold your hand until we get you to the person who can answer your question and can help or assist. And I think that that's really important for everybody who's listening to know. I do think we have another question though. I don't.
I think two.
Oh, okay.
Suggestions for someone post NICU that has continued stress and difficulties due to a medically complex baby.
So I want to make sure I understand. So somebody who was already in the midst of really trying to manage what was an ongoing stressful situation, and now that we have this additional level of stress, difficulty accessing support, etc.
It just says someone just post NICU that has continued stress. So I see it. I view it as my as my situation as well. Medically complex child. Medical. We've done a hospitalization during this time as well. I think suggestions maybe to manage that stress and the difficulties that kind of come up. As of having a a complex child.
Right. So the first thing that I want to say, and it reminds me a bit of the cross stitch analogy, is not only does the backside of the cross stitch look messy, but when you're in the middle of it, especially if it's got lots of colors, in the middle of it is messy. You can't really tell what it's going to look like. All you know is you've got all these threads and you're supposed to do something with them. So one thing I want to just say and remind everybody about is that this is messy. And for anybody who had already been in the middle of a post-NICU complicated medically or developmentally sort of situation, it's messy because that's the nature of it. Not because you're not good at cross-stitch or weaving, but because this stuff is messy and it just has to look like that right now. And so what you do is you slow down and you identify those threads that you're going to work with first. The primary ones to work with first. And even when it means that some of those other ones are going to wait for right now, it's different than avoiding them or pretending they're not there, but saying, right now, I thought this was going to be a collaborative weaving, but all my collaborators are in self-isolation. So now I can only work with, I got 2 hands. I don't have 12 hands of, people. So I can only work with, right now, first this and this. And that's what I'm going to do first. And that's another level of acceptance. This is what I can reasonably do and reasonably control. And this is what I cannot reasonably control. And so the willingness, the ability to say, okay, this is how much I can do, and here are the other things that are not going to get done, and they may be household things, they may be other kinds of things that would matter to you under other circumstances. There's also an element of reaching for the collaboration and help that is available, even if that person is not as skilled a weaver as you are, to make space for some additional hands and some additional support that may fall short of what you would wish for in an ideal world, or in the world that we inhabited 3 months ago that was also not ideal, but we had more options. So thinking from that perspective, and again, going back to those foundational ideas of what is the primary goal? What is your primary objective? And if the primary objective is health and safety, then that's where you're at. And if that is all set and stable, you can move into the next level of weaving, because that has been stabilized. That has been, that piece of the cross stitch, that piece of the weaving is done. So I hope that's helpful. And of course, more specificity in specific cases.
Yeah, because I think a lot of it spoke to, which is, I think we've had in a previous conversation is, the crisis isn't over for them.
No, right.
It possibly never will be in my case.
Right.
And
yes.
so kind of taking it step by step, like you said.
Step by step. Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes it's moment by moment, and that's okay. That's
yes.
what it is.
Right. And then think about when we think about what can I do that will have some influence, some impact. If you really try to work with all the threads at the same time, you're just going to have a mess that looks different than the mess before. But if you start to work with one or two, you can actually make some movement. And so less is more.
It's probably less overwhelming to just take and do one thing at a time, even if it's just one thing at a time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Seeing that done and being able to call that a win, right? And then moving to the next one that feels good.
Yeah. And sometimes those things are tangible.
I said, and giving yourself a little grace. I mean, you're doing the best that you can.
Yes.
In the situation that we're having, and it's a unique situation. It's a hard situation, and to acknowledge that, and to, it's okay to not be okay sometimes. And we're not magical. Like,
we are not magical. I have 2 magic wands in my office. Neither one of them work. Really frustrating. I also have a crystal ball. It also doesn't work.
Do you have any tips for, on, how to deal with family that isn't respecting or understanding the reoccurring emotions that you were feeling?
Can we lock them in the closet?
You can fantasize about that.
Okay.
You can. Vividly.
That's awesome.
You can talk about wanting to do that. Remember that most of the time when you're getting that sort of reaction and pushback, probably underneath is fear. So family members, let's say, your own parents or your partner's parents, for example, very commonly, or in-law siblings, feel helpless, want it to be over, don't want to have to, first of all, feel what they feel when they hear about what's coming up for you, what's getting stirred up again, because it's evocative. Because of course it's evocative. It's about the most important relationships, most important experiences we ever have in life, with the people that we love, with our babies, with our kids, with our partners, our families. So the intensity is there, and that can be, people push it away. I don't want to deal with it. I can't deal with it, whatever it may be. And so then they get mad because the fear or the sadness, which can also be underneath, is so intense and unexpected when they didn't expect it, to be hearing it, seeing you have these feelings. And so then the anger is armor, or the dismissiveness is armor. And so I would say if the tapestry metaphor speaks to you, you might share it and say, this is actually part of what it means to have powerful, meaningful experiences in life. Those experiences are going to be evoked again sometimes. And the feelings connected to them are part of the experience. That's part of what made the experience so powerful and important to begin with. And yes, I'm feeling some of those feelings again. And to know, if you really are falling back into those feelings, it would be good to investigate, wow, is there some unresolved trauma here? If what's happening is you're feeling some stuff and it's evocative, but you're really still kind of in the, you know, you're in the present, you're still here, you're feeling, you're reminded, you're thinking about it. You can say to people who are prickly about you talking about it or having these reactions, say, you know, this is actually really normal. This is me looking back on those experiences in the context of what's happening now. That's part of how we grow. It's how we develop. Those things were important. Those experiences were powerful. And boy, this experience now reminds me of some of that. I'm not afraid of those feelings. And I hope that you know that you don't need to be afraid of me having these feelings either. I just want to share them with you because you're important to me, because you matter to me. Something like that might help.
That's great. I think that's very helpful. And we can't really forget our past.
No, and I really think we shouldn't.
I think we shouldn't either. It's part of who we are. I don't remember who I heard this from once, but maybe it was, I'll think of who it was in a minute, but she said, you know, if you could go back, we would never wish upon our children pain and suffering. We would never wish for them to have gone through that premature journey and the collateral damage that may have occurred afterwards or because of. But would we get rid of that time period?
Yeah. We talked about this too, didn't we?
Did we? In order to get rid of that, for it to not have happened, we might not have the child. We might not be where we are today, the jobs or the family, careers, or we would have to, you know, to go back and redo means undoing
all of that.
And so that's our history. Yeah. And hopefully as we go through, it informs us, it informs who we are, we learn from it, right?
And it's part of our development. So it's not just memory, it's building blocks of the self. And becoming a parent, whether it's to a first baby or a subsequent baby, is all part of the development of yourself as a parent to this child and these children as part of this family. And so it's all about building, it's who we become as we develop. And, you know, I would do anything to make it so that my kids didn't have the experience of being exposed to the steroids they're exposed to when I was on bed rest, or the stress that I was under when I was on bed rest, or to their NICU experience, and to losing all of those weeks in utero peacefully to be born full term. I would love for them to have had all the things that, you know, at the time I thought they were promised, you know, full term healthy pregnancy without the stress. But I would not want to give up everything that I have learned and the person that I have become and continue to become as I continue to learn. I'm still learning, still developing as a parent and a person in the family and individually and professionally as a result of my part of that experience, which changed me and continues to dramatically in ways that I'm really deeply grateful for, that I thought I got on that night on bed rest, but oh boy, I had no idea. And how could I have? Right. So it is foundational to our development. And even though you know, I didn't want those kinds of experiences to be part of my development, I didn't get to choose, but I got to choose what to do with what was in front of me. And it's a process, and it's an ongoing process, continues to be. You know, it's never done because those threads don't go away. They just become maybe more prominent, less prominent, depending where you're at in your weaving process.
Thank you. Crystal, do you have any other thoughts that you want to share?
I don't think so. I think, I'm so grateful for Mara to come, and I love the tapestry. I love everything it represents, and it's a great visualization of of what's really going on, and it just perfect. I love it.
Me
I'm
too.
glad it works.
And I can't think of a better guest to have on our first point of views.
Thank you.
Such a nice way to spend a Sunday afternoon, a little bit of time thinking
Such a pleasure.
about the journey that we're on as people, as human beings, individually and as a collective, knowing that there are people who understand, who have great insight into this journey that we all call life. And that we're never alone. I tell my boys all the time, we may think that decisions that we make are just about us or just impact us, but they don't. We have a community, and our community may look different than somebody else's community, but there is a community for us. And I just want to encourage everybody to tap into that community. Virtually, this is a new, weird, kind of thing that, I never utilized Zoom or really FaceTime very much with my kids, some when they went to college, but not to the extent
like this.
No, not like this.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a rare moment in history. If I hear the U word one more time, the unprecedented, I may scream, but I think it's a unique, I've decided to use a different U word. It's a unique moment in time. And while I don't think everybody needs to learn how to, garden or bake bread or, churn butter or do all these really whatever kind of things, I do think that it's a really unique opportunity for us to think about some of these deep thoughts that sometimes we don't necessarily have time to think about.
It's an opportunity to reflect.
It's an opportunity to reflect, yeah. So thank you for giving us food for thought this Sunday afternoon. And we haven't quite decided when our next point of views will be, but I have a feeling that we're going to continue to do these. We're very excited about it. And I hope that those of you who have watched this afternoon and will watch in the future will feel free to send us an email and let us know what you need, what kind of things you want to hear about and learn about and talk about. And we invite you to do that. And so on behalf of NICU Helping Hands and our staff, thank you, Dr. Stein, for spending the afternoon with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
For coming and spending the time with us. And we wish you all a very wonderful week.